Dear students, in the past video we had seen about the response recovery, everything we had seen. Now we are going to see about the structural and non-structural measures. So first of all, what is DRR we had seen, and what is mitigation, why mitigation is needed, and types of mitigation. Everything we had seen already in the previous videos. Now we are going to see about the structural measures for cyclone. Engineering measures such as cyclone shelter is one of the key cyclone mitigation measure adopted. For effective employment and management of cyclone shelters, multipurpose versions have been built in carefully selected locations, identifying uses of both normal and disaster periods. Cyclone shelters demonstrate an excellent dual purpose use of during non disaster periods and cyclones. Drought risk reduction measures, structural measures. So, what are the measures to be taken for drought risk reduction? Deep tube wells in the region to increase the agricultural productivity. Irrigation is necessary for many types of crops, especially for burrow rice cultivation. There is a significant development of irrigation systems nowadays in compared to 1980s. Earthquake risk reduction measures, non-structural measures we are going to see. Earthquake risk reduction measures, adequate and sustainable land use planning with seismic microsizing mapping, the link between the land use master planning for earthquake protection and other urban planning protection measures and the control of building quality are so interrelated. That is, land use master planning, urban planning protection measure and control of building quality. இந்த மூணுமே உங்களுக்கு வந்து interrelated-ஆ இருக்கணும். Very high resolution satellites are being used for the detection of tectonic movement of the earth and earth's fault zones. So, ஹை ரெசல்யூஷன் சேட்டிலைட்ஸ் நமக்கு தேவை, எப்படி டெக்டானிக் பிளேட்ஸ் வந்து மூவ் ஆகுது அப்படிங்கிறத பார்க்குறதுக்கு. ஃபர்தர் டு தட், seismic vulnerability maps of the buildings and earthquake prevention plan for urban areas are some other useful measures for earthquake prevention. So this is earthquake risk reduction non-structural measure. Flood risk reduction measure structural. So, storage reservoir or basins to restrict the overflow of water and retarding basins to lower the flow of flooding and levees and flood walls to confine the flood waters and improvement of channel capacity by removing the encroaches from the channels. Some structural measures such as flood embankment, channel improvement, river draining, coastal embankment, and etc. to combat with the flood sufferings. So there are some options of structural measures: dams and reservoirs for impounding excess runoff, detention basin, that is retention pond to lower the level of flooding downstream, embankment, dike, polder and levee, burned or flood wall. These are the structural constructions to block the movement of water from rivers to the floodplain areas. Improvement of conveyance capacity, planned but not done due to cost of element, flood bypass, flood diversions, and then watershed management and afforestation, which is very very important practice but not practiced in a greater way. Flood risk reduction measures structural. In India, we are using flood embankments, channel improvements, river draining, coastal embankment to combat the flood sufferings. Among these structural measures, construction of embankment is most popular and very old practice. This is also very cheap method compared to other structural measures. So, flood risk reduction measures structural. Impacts of structural measures. With the experience over the last few decades, it was observed that the structural measures do not usually bring only with blessings, they also have adverse effect. The adverse effects always do not appear shortly after their construction but become apparent with the elapse of time. Flood risk reduction measures, non-structural measures. What are the non-structural measures? just floodplain zoning and management, policies for infrastructure planning and development in the flood plan, flood proofing and disaster preparedness and response planning, flood forecasting and warning, flood fighting, evacuation and shelter management, and flood insurance. These are the non structural measures to reduce the risk of flood. And some other non-structural risks, non-structural measures to reduce the flood risk. One is raised community areas with the basic human needs, home placed at higher elevations, flood resistant infrastructure to continue critical services during flood, floodplain zoning, as I mentioned earlier, changes in cropping system, training and public awareness, and institutional arrangements, flood warning systems, local disaster action plan, flood forecasting and warning were later incorporated as it was felt that structural measures alone could not mitigate the flood problems. So some other non-structural measures to reduce the flood risk, floodplain zoning management. These are the points already we had seen here. Next, about the introduction of Panchayat Raj institutions that we will see in the next video. Thank you.